everybody, welcome to the Animation Tools and Style of Dillongoo Studios presentation. We are doing a kind of an overview of what we usually do to make our videos in terms of animation style, in terms of the tools that we've done, in terms of the workflows that we've developed, all those kinds of things that are kind of unique to what we've done in the past year or two, especially. So let's get into it if you guys have any questions, but real quick intro. I'm Dillon Gu, founder of Dillongoo Studios. We also have Raymond Luke, who is the animation lead, and Tony Garcia, another animation lead. Cody Winchester, finaling render dev wizard guy, professional sorcerer. So yeah, we're gonna get into it. Let's just start with a simple one, literally. A lot of people probably already have experience with this in industry pipelines, but it's a big thing that we do, making sure that we as animators can animate as optimized as possible. So we always make sure that we have good playback. How do we do that? We have rig and viewport simplification. We have typically proxy characters that we've modeled ahead of time to switch between, especially when we're doing body mechanics and stuff like that. We don't need all the face detail. We don't need all the clothes detail. We want to be able to focus on the silhouettes of the characters. So one thing we do is we create these very simple blocky characters. These are actually parented directly to the rigs themselves as objects rather than armature modifiers. This helps with playback even more. And we really just want to make sure the optimization is as good as possible. We also have some custom viewport settings that can literally simplify the viewport to give us the silhouettes. And that helps the animators a lot in order to make better decisions during animation in real time. Yeah, so Blender's great for that. It's got a lot of customization, and that's what we do. We also have an example here where we have a very clear and distinct difference between when we don't simplify and when we do simplify our characters. So as you can see here, the playback is pretty bad. This is obviously full resolution, no simplification of subdivisions or anything, all the final models and the background. Now we've hidden all that. We've decided to switch out for our proxy character, and the playback is basically perfect. It's very, very good. And then in addition to that, we have this silhouette mode that allows us to really choose all of our poses much more carefully, especially in a pipeline that focuses on replicating 2D animation, which is what we do. So that is an example of our viewport simplification process. And now we can go into what I mentioned before. How do we get anime looks with a CG model? It's something that a lot of people have been wondering about as a concept. It's difficult to do traditionally because 3D is something that kind of looks too perfect and has a bit of a too realistic kind of look to it by default. So in order to get an anime look, we actually have to break a lot of rules. We have to break a lot of physics. There's a lot of things that 2D animators and 2D artists have done throughout the years and figured out what looks good that don't follow normal physics. So a lot of what we do does the same things that a lot of 2D animators have done mentally and through ages of learning and teaching the art itself already, like intuitively. So one of the things that we do is camera-based lattices. This is something that makes a big difference despite it looking a little strange. So in 3D, this would look weird, and I'll show you in a little bit, but the flattis, as we call it, is a flattening lattice, which allows us to take a character's head in particular, mostly because the face and the head of an anime character is usually the most sensitive to looking to 3D and where a lot of the simplification happens, but it'll actually flatten the character so that it looks more like a higher focal length. Typically when 2D artists draw faces, they'll actually flatten the head naturally because we tend to sort of perceive heads in orthographic view, even if we don't see them in real life in orthographic view. So because of that simplification of the concept of a head, it's actually better typically for a 3D character to have a flattened head relative to camera to fake that focal length without changing the focal length of the camera itself, because sometimes you want the body and everything to be viewed in perspective, which typically is rather exaggerated in anime. So by separating those two things, we're able to achieve a more 2D look. If you want to see what it looks like in 3D, that's what it looks like. So it's a really cool concept. It is completely invisible from the camera, which is really, really cool. And because it's dynamic and because it follows the camera itself, we can just sort of turn it on and it just works. So setting this up for your characters is absolutely worthwhile. It's one of the things that we do at our studio that helps get that anime look. And we have custom rig macros. This is one of my favorite topics. I have been obsessed with this idea that animators should use as few bones as possible when they animate. I personally do this in my own workflows when I'm animating, and it speeds me up a lot. And not only that, but it helps me think more intuitively about a lot of motion. So one thing that we do is we have an eyebrow macro. So this is an eyebrow shape macro, which allows us to use a single bone to control various different shapes of the eyebrow with just different translation movements, different axes of translation, and different rotations. So this gives us a huge range of emotions and basic shapes that the animators can still tweak on top of that. We do have tweak bones that can push it even further. But by getting that basic shape in a very intuitive way with a single bone, it allows our animators to work a lot faster, a lot more efficiently. And it also helps define the shapes ahead of time so that we can get a consistency between, different animation styles and stuff like that, which helps our characters stay on model as well. So with the custom macros, you can see here, like, we're able to get these like relatively nuanced and subtle things that don't feel too robotic. They still feel very natural. They're interpolated in a way in the macro and how they're built to feel like natural movement. So that's what we like to do. I mean, it's my passion. It's my passion. So we did it for a lot of things. Guess what? We also did it for lip sync. This is actually really, really cool. I'm particularly proud of how we've gotten this lip sync rig to work, because we are able to get 80% of the lip sync done solely on one control. So you can see here, we've set it up specifically so that each shape that interpolates to another shape is only the shapes that it needs to interpolate to. So for example, widening the mouth versus narrowing the mouth does not need to interpolate to each other directly. It will either turn off and then turn back on. And so we actually have, the left and right axis, the U and the EE shapes you see there, those will go directly narrow or directly wide. The up and down will go directly with very pursed lips to very open lips. Those kinds of things, those polarizations of the axes allow us to properly choose how to set this up in a way that gives us extremely natural movement for the different shapes that we need in a lip sync control. And turns out, this has served us really well for the past, I think, 3 or 4 years now, where we do all of our lip sync with this control. It has been tried and tested. We don't need that many shapes. We don't need a slider with like 12 different shapes or anything like that, which I've seen before. It's a much more efficient way of working. We also have, I don't know if you saw here, but we also have like the forward and backwards axes. We have the scale axes being used as well to open up the teeth. So this allows us to be very, very efficient with lip sync. It's absolutely incredible what we can do with a single bone. And I recommend it if you guys ever want to look into it. We actually have a rig called Emily that has this control on it. That's on our Gumroad that you can take a look at. But yeah, let's see. We also have a jaw influence control. This is just something I'll mention real quick. It allows us to, when you open the jaw, it'll allow you to change how much the jaw itself opens versus how much the mouth opens. So that gives us a nice bit of control to change, like if you want it to look more, we'll say 3D or more 2D, since typically 2D, they don't open the jaw itself when they're talking. So it's a way to sort of flatten and stylize that motion as well. The finger scaler rig, this is actually something that we've kind of borrowed from Rigify. You guys are probably familiar with the curling control, but we've added an extra variable here, which has given us so much more freedom. If you guys don't know already, the Rigify control actually works specifically on just scaling uniformly on every axis for the curl. I believe might be the y-axis, but either way, it scales the whole finger. And when it scales the whole finger, and when it curls the whole finger, it specifically curls the finger into this like hook shape every time. And sometimes that's helpful and sometimes it's not. Sometimes you want to have like a straighter finger. And so that's why Rigify includes those individual finger controls. What I said was, no, I don't want to touch those individual finger controls ever again. So we decided to figure out, is there a way to get this curl control to actually give us full finger control with a single bone per finger? And here we actually can show you, we've simply separated the axes. So Tony came up with this as a great solution where we have one axis of scale controlling one knuckle and the other axis of scale controlling the other knuckle, which actually gives us the same exact result as Rigify when you scale all of the axes uniformly. But now you have this extra layer of control where you can control the different knuckles with a single bone. So that's a great use case for simplifying the rigs and making it easier for the animators to use and making things more efficient. And there we go. So I'll turn it over to Tony, our lead animator, for the tropes of a Dillon Gu Studios video, specifically talking about the animation style stuff that we do.
Alrighty, thank you. Yeah, so my name's Tony, lead animator of Dillongoo Studios, and I'm just gonna be talking about the tropes of our videos, the shots that we tend to take, and some of our philosophies that we have when animating our characters. So for the first slide here, we have one shot that is very common, common in our videos. It's these extreme like face close-ups, eye close-ups. There are two that we tend to do. So the one on the left side is what we call like the Shinji shot or the Eva shot. So it's based off of Evangelion. And what it is it's a low focal length camera sort of placed right in front on top down of the character. And it distorts the face, sort of like what Dillon was talking about earlier with the Lattis. We're using some of that face distortion intentionally to create like a sense of hysteria or horror, and it's really good for extreme emotions. And then when we want to sort of emphasize the subtle reactions and the smaller emotions of the character, we tend to do the type of shot on the right, which is an extreme close-up of the eyes. It's usually one eye, but sometimes two. And having the camera this close to the eye really lets the animator go wild with animating all the little micro expressions and things that can make the thing that they're reacting to feel larger than life. And so it really helps drive home the emotion of the scene for the audience when they're watching it. And this is another type of shot. We're moving more into the action realm here. This is another type of shot that's really common in our videos. This is, of course, the O-body punch. And as you can see, it's an animation technique that's kind of pretty simple on the surface. It's basically just someone punching the camera. It's punching, if you go to the next couple of slides, you can just skip like maybe 2 or 3. If you break down the animation here, you can see it's composed of 4 main keyframes. So we have the first keyframe, which is basically the ready pose or whatever the character's doing before they start to punch. And then the second keyframe where the character pulls their hand back or their weapon back. And this is the part in the animation where the attacking force, so to speak, is the furthest away from the camera in the animation. And then we have the third keyframe, which is where the character will throw their weight forward in preparation to launch the attack. And then we have the fourth and final keyframe where the attacking force hits the camera. And you can see how much of the screen real estate is taken up by the fist here. And that's really important because this shot is meant to represent a point of view, like a point of view perspective of the character being attacked. And so it's really dynamic for the audience because they're sort of experiencing the attack versus just watching the attack happen to someone else. And if you go to the next slide, you can see some of the examples that we've done in our videos and how we've thrown in our own little variations. So you can throw things at the camera like here. You can have the camera whip past the character for extra dynamism. And you can do this cool thing here where the camera transitions from following the character to following the object being thrown. And the next type of shot in regards to action that we tend to do in our videos is these treadmill shots. So first, I guess we should explain what treadmills are. And you can see that, in the video there, a treadmill is basically just scrolling, repeating geometry. And it's typically like, a really, really long like segment of small pieces of geometry that are repeating. And this is really useful for cuts that have the character traversing like through world space, like large distances, instead of having the animation, actually move through world space and having your curves be insane. You can have all the animation be in a relatively contained area in the 3D viewport, and then have the background be the thing that conveys the motion. As it says here, it makes chase scenes easier to animate, and you can typically get more motion in these types of shots because you can make the background move so much faster than you can have the characters move through world space. If we go to the next shot, I think there's some examples of what we've done. So it's usually a lateral type of shot, so it's scrolling left to right or right to left. And yeah, you can see here one of the chasings we've done in a tunnel here. This is just repeating geometry, and they're actually stationary in world space as the environment around them rushes past, giving that sense of motion. Here's one here where we forego the background completely. Very anime. And then here's the shot that you saw before, and here you can see the final result. And then, yeah, we're getting into a little bit of the 2D philosophy that we try to carry into our videos. And so we have all of our great rigs, but sometimes a great rig simply isn't flexible enough to do, what a 2D artist can do. They're free to just draw whatever they want on the canvas, and sometimes the 3D artist needs that freedom as well to achieve what they want for a specific shot. And so we've tried a lot of methods, and sometimes we find that like the simplest methods tend to work. And with Blender, you can seamlessly integrate 2D and 3D. And so getting these types of, for example, gag faces that are very common in anime, these sort of like really funny faces that have exaggerated character proportions and mouth shapes or eye shapes or whatever, being able to just draw these into the viewport is an option that we have opted for in the last, probably like throughout the last year, I would say. And if you go to the next slide, you can see a couple of examples in our videos here. And the method is pretty simple. If the GIF should be playing, one of them.
Yeah.
Oop.
I think if you click the GIF.
Yeah, maybe.
Tried. That's what happened when I click them.
No.
No.
Okay, well, maybe we can edit the GIF. I'll send you. You can edit
Yeah. Sounds good.
Movie magic.
Yeah. So for the GIF that's playing now, you can see that there's just a plane in front of the face. It's parented to the head, and the grease pencil strokes are just drawn on top of that plane. And so what this allows is a little bit of leniency for the character to actually be moving, because the grease pencil strokes will then be parented to the head. So when they move their head, the animation that you do or any frames that you draw with grease pencil can still somewhat believably follow the face. And then if we go to the next slide, we can see, or I guess we can't see yet. We have another use case for grease pencil in our videos, and this is a really it's a really recent tool that we've developed, and the thing that excites me the most, and it's the ability to do hand-drawn shadows in our videos. And so again, sort of similar to the rig situation, sometimes we want a bespoke shadow on characters for whatever reason, and relying on shaders to do them to the degree that, say, a 2D artist would sometimes isn't. It's just not able to pull it off, or it would require too much work to R&D it, mid-production. And so having the animators be able to quickly just draw in the shadow with ease is a very powerful tool. If we go to the next slide, we can see an example of it. And are these GIFs playing? Dang. Okay, I'll send you this one too. So for the GIF on the left, you can see that the grease pencil strokes are drawn from camera view, and then they're projected onto the face, and they follow the face. And Cody will talk later a bit more about how it works. But you can see from the final result on the right, those shadows underneath the eyebrow and in the forehead around this area, the crown of the head, I guess. Those are some specific shadows that enhance the anger of the character, and being able to draw those in very quickly as an animator lets you put even more emotion into your scene in a way that sometimes CG can not allow for. If you go to, there's another example in the next slide. So this is another really cool example, actually. This, if we were to imagine the shadow on this shot here to be just sort of like a default, like shader-based shadow, maybe just half the face is shaded, or maybe the face is just completely lit. I think it would lose a bit of that overpowering, like dominant feeling that this character has in the frame. We already have the camera below the character looking up at her, but having the shadow be drawn as it is gives it a bit of extra like oomph to the shot. And again, like, maybe we could have gotten this shot with a shader, but it's a guarantee to be able to draw it in and enhance this feeling for the character. So it's a really cool tool. It's something that we're going to implement a lot more in the future going forward. And I guess I can pass it off to Cody to talk about how it works.
All right. Hi, I'm Cody Winchester. Do pipeline and tools, visual effects for Dillongoo Studios. So yeah, this tool is like Soren or Tony said, it's very new, and so we're still developing it and improving on it. But in this, don't know if it's playing, but the left GIF should be playing. Oh, it's a video. There we go. So yeah, you can see we have these three shapes. We have like this green shape and the blue shape. Those are the two keyframes, and then the skin tone shape is the one that is like demonstrating the interpolation between the two keyframes. So the artist only has to draw these two keyframes, and then using the surface of the character, it can match the two shapes and interpolate between those two keyframes while following the motion of the character. And even though that they're similar shapes, but there's different like levels of detail, it interpolates relatively smoothly, and it saves a lot of time for doing these types of shadow animations. And yeah, the right one is also same thing. Well, this one is just a single keyframe showing how it can extrapolate following the motion of the character. So it, like, the way it works is that it'll project from the camera and bind to the surface of the character's mesh, and then it'll follow it, and it just works.
It just works.
Yeah. I think we're good on this slide.
All right.
Do you want me to do Gu Dynamics, or was that promised?
Yeah, you
Or
can,
should
you
we
can
go
go
back?
and do it.
Okay. So yeah, with Gu Dynamics, this is another tool that we've developed. It's for creating dynamic simulations, mainly for like cloth and hair, and it can be used for more than that, but that's like the biggest use cases that we've had. And so it works. There's 3 different methods that it uses. It can work with soft body simulations, cloth simulations, and those are both the built-in simulation systems that Blender has. And then we have a third option where that uses custom written or custom created geometry nodes modifier to create the simulation and then transfer it to our rigs. And with those, like the 2 biggest or the 2 that are most useful are the geometry nodes and the soft body. The soft body, especially because it has a certain level of like shape retaining. Like it can maintain the shape of the bones that at its default pose, which is very important for anime characters, because if you're simulating their hair, they have like very specific and iconic hair shapes, and with the cloth simulation, it'll just completely lose that shape. So soft body and the geometry nodes also has this shape preservation that is really nice and helpful for doing anime simulations. One of the things that the geometry nodes version gives us that the soft body lacks, and the cloth, or they can do it, but they can't do collisions nearly like as well. Like it's very finicky and just doesn't really work. But with the geometry nodes version, we can set up collisions. Then we can actively like develop it and change it, and test new things. Like it's very flexible with what we can do with it. Whereas the built-in simulation systems, we're kind of hacking a way to get what we need. I think we're good on this slide.
There we go.
Yeah, and this is just a demo of how we use it to create just some basic like motion or simulation for the hair of this character. And if one of you guys want to talk about like, or if you have anything to talk about with Gu Dynamics, this is probably a good point to do it.
I love it.
It is fantastic. Yeah, Ramen, go ahead.
Yeah, Gu dynamics, at least for like simple acting shots like this, it gets us like 90% of the way there. You just have to clean up the clipping in the color afterwards, but most of the motion's pretty nice. And you can set the influence of the hair reactivity to cascade like quadratically or linearly, so there's going to be more overlap on the bottom of the hair rather than the roots.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think so. One of the big reasons why we wanted to create a custom simulation solution was because, like what Cody mentioned, it's like we wanted to move it in a way that was relatively similar to physics. But the moment it followed physics exactly, we ran into the issue with the fact that the hair would droop too much, the characters would change too much, because a lot of times in 2D, these movements would be approximated. And so by using soft body or using GeoNose and having this custom solution built into the bones, not only can we get a more stylized movement, but also because it's bones, the animators can actually, bake all this information to the bones themselves and adjust it as needed. So we're able to retain the shape when we need to, or break the shape when we need to, despite the fact that we're not animating it completely by hand. So that's been really, really useful.
All right, so the next tool that we'll talk about is what we refer to as the mesh tweaker. And what this allows us to do is allows us to basically add local and as like dynamic as many like shape keys as you want to a linked mesh, and it'll like as you can see in this video, we add a mesh tweaker to the jacket of this character, and we can go in and we can clean up all the bad deformations that we have. This is like I think this is after a dynamics bake. We get some like subpar deformations on the jacket, so we can go in there and we can add keyframes, and we can add as many keyframes as we want. We can add one to every frame, and or sorry, we can add shape keys and then keyframe them to do like per frame tweaks and fix up deformations pretty much as we want. Like it gets, it's very flexible. And right here you can see that the way it's set up is independent of topology. So it works based off of shape proximity. So what this allows us to do is, like, if we add a mesh tweaker and we change up the animation, and then later on down the line, the original linked mesh actually gets altered somewhat. And if you were to transfer the deformations based on topology, you would lose all those deformations because the topology changed and your local shape key mesh is now different. But with ours, it's purely proximity based, and it figures out the mapping based on proximity, and it can transfer just perfectly fine. And we can change it whatever we want to the original mesh, and as long as the shape stays the same, it'll transfer the deformations, and we don't have to repeat work later on in the project.
Yeah, this is a huge pipeline win, I would say. A lot of the times in our previous projects, we've had issues with, wanting to make any kind of shape key tweaks in a local file. Linked files are notoriously unflexible typically for this kind of stuff. Shape keys and mesh data are usually not easy to override without losing the ability to update them. So with this, we're able to basically create a saved state in which we say we wanted to form it this way. And even if we update the topology later, it'll follow that, which is amazing and gives us so much more flexibility in terms of workflows and modeling and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's been very helpful for cleanup, but also for fixing clipping. That's like a huge use for it.
Oh yeah.
And in this video, you can see. So like I was mentioning, the fact that it's like the deformations based on proximity or mapped based on proximity, that allows us not only to prevent having to redo work, but we can also transfer the deformations to similar shaped objects, but that are completely different, like meshes. So here we add one mesh tweaker to the shorts, but then we can actually transfer it to these other detail meshes that are completely different objects, and it transfers the deformations like perfectly fine. The other method that we have for editing link meshes is the warp modifier. This is a modifier that I really like. I think is very underused, and it can offer a lot of flexibility. So here you can see we add it to the rigs of our characters so that we can do these like more free-form deformations that are not like, they're not based on like normals or anything like the displace modifier. You can only work on normals, but this one it works based off two objects or two bones, and it takes the difference in their transformations, and it applies that to the meshes based on a fall off from the root, or the from object is what's referred to. And so you can apply these deformations, and it's very freeform. You can move it around and change where you're what portion of the mesh you're deforming. And yeah, it's very flexible, offers a lot of tool. It's a great tool to fix deformations, and especially clipping.
Yeah, it's especially good because you don't have to do any weight painting at all.
Yeah, no weight painting. Like you can do weight painting if you like, say you want to add a warp modifier to just the left side.
Mm-hmm.
You can put a vertex group on it to do that, and that's really helpful. But I mean, it's not a requirement. So this is how I use the warp modifier to apply notes. So I get notes for this effect here, this fire tornado, and it will say like, oh, the tornado should fill the frame in this way for these frames. So I'll have very specific notes, but this fire tornado is like pretty much all procedural animation, so I can't control procedural animation without affecting everything. So with the warp modifier, I can go in there and I can selectively move parts of the mesh and match up to the notes and retain everything else as it was before. So it's very, very good for tackling notes that you get for specific shots. And
yeah, that's especially true for doing like that's especially true for doing things that are supposed to emulate 2D, because in 2D artists can do that. They can just change a silhouette, and for us, like, it's a little harder, and the warp tool does a really good job with that.
Yeah, but it goes really well with procedural effects. Like, it's helped me a lot.
Yeah,
to get what I need to get for the shot.
Yeah. It's time for Raymond to do some Baked to Empties talk. What is Baked to Empties?
Hello, quick introduction. I am Raymond Luke. I'm one of the animation leads at Dillongoo Studios. Baked Empties is a tool that we've been refining over the past like 6 years to maximize what you can do with empties in Blender, be it space switching or adding new controls to existing rigs, or switching the parents between things that are already animated while retaining the animation, and setting up aim setups for weapons. We can jump to the next slide. So for the first example, this is one of the settings in Baked Empties, which is changing animation to world space. In the video playing, the world control of the character is slightly crooked. So when you change something in the graph editor, in the Y or X axis, it's going to be diagonal, which isn't the easiest to clean up. So if you run a empty to make the animation in world space, it'll follow the true coordinates of the scene. This lets you quickly edit animation in a way that makes sense in math. So in the graph editor there, I'm just sculpting the curves just to follow like a basic parabola. And you can very easily see different spacing pops and clean up different issues in the animation from stuff that might be harder to fix up if this was not in world space. And it's also very useful for walk cycles.
Yes.
The next setting we have in Baked Empties is subcontrols. So it spawns a control underneath the control that you selected. So it's an additive thing, kind of like an animation layer, but just on a control. So if you have a revision on an acting shot, and the note was just to add some head shakes to some of the dialogue, you can quickly add a subcontrol here and just do the head shakes on the subcontrol without disrupting your original animation. Then if you reset the pose of the empty, it'll just default to the original animation. So the third option we have is custom parenting. This is really handy if you need to constrain or change the parent of multiple things at one time. So for this example, the hands contact the ship at a specific frame, and the fingers are pretty much in IK mode. So I want to change all the parents of the IK controls and the fingers at the same time. So with baked empties, you can really easily change that and keep the existing animation, and then delete whatever else that you don't need from the pops at the end. The last setting we have here is pretty much aim constraint setups. So if you bake an empty with an offset and target the rotation to that with a damp track or a follow, pretty much what happens is you get to alter the rotation of the selected object in world space. And like say if you have a sword, for example, you're just controlling the rotation with a control at the end that's just translational. So this is really easy. This makes editing sword trails really easy, and fixing up the spacing possible that way.
Yeah, it's really good for fixing up arcs, because very rarely do you actually get to see the curve that the arc makes in the graph editor. So when you parent that empty to the tip, you see exactly the curve that it's making in the graph editor. Clean it up, just right there. Okay, so this is our next bit, which is Pencil Plus, which is back to me. So Pencil Plus is specifically line art for anime outlines and stuff like that. We have an example here. You can see that we basically have a 3D character, but in order to get it to look 2D, we have to have a bit of line art drawn on top, and that's done. We'll say procedurally. It's done using an algorithm. It's done using edge detection and things like that. And the tool that we use for it is called Pencil Plus. It's by Psoft. And it draws and approximates the line art that a 2D artist would typically draw on a character in 2D animation. Now, you can technically achieve the same thing with Grease Pencil. There is a line art modifier, and the line art modifier is doing a very similar thing as Pencil Plus is. It uses edge detection. It's a fantastic tool. It's also built into native Blender, and we used Grease Pencil for a very long time. A lot of people have asked us in the past if Psoft Pencil Plus is worthwhile, because it is $400, I believe, as of right now. So it's not free. So it's going to be a rather large investment for especially an individual. And a lot of people ask if it's worthwhile. So for us, absolutely. It's been amazing. We love Pencil Plus compared to Grease Pencil for one major reason, which is that it is significantly faster. So Pencil Plus, I think, is optimized to a degree where we can see improvements of like 10 times the speed at which you have to calculate Grease Pencil at the moment. There's a lot of reasons for that. I believe right now Grease Pencil is solely using CPU calculations, for example. Pencil Plus is actually raster based. So there's a lot of different ways that they're doing it, but it's ultimately giving us a very similar result, even cleaner in some cases, with a couple more options as well, which is cool because Pencil Plus is a rather mature tool. So another thing people don't know is that Pencil Plus is actually been around for 3ds Max for a while, I believe for Maya as well. But Psoft has been a leading technological giant, I think, when it comes to the CG anime industry. They've developed tons of tools, not just for line art, but also for compositing and for CG stuff. And they've been able to help anime kind of go into the digital realm. And it shows. I think their understanding of how to get this 2D workflow to translate to a digital world has been instrumental to getting such a fantastic tool developed. So we use Pencil Plus. We love it. I did want to say, though, that technically speaking, line art is not as simple as just pressing a button. We do model our characters with line art in mind. So you can't just take any character and put line art on it and hope that it turns out like this. We have to have a good understanding of how the line art is being calculated, and then take that model that we have and use our understanding of how that line art is calculated to our advantage, and manipulating the model to fit those algorithms. So that's one of the reasons why we're able to make it look so good. It also involves simply turning off the lines in certain places on the face, for example, to simplify it, to make sure it's not too busy, turning on lines specifically on certain parts, like those cracks that you see there, for example, those are fully turned on, right? You have to draw them so the algorithm knows, those kinds of things. And you'll notice in other cases, like it'll just be based on the shape of the face itself. It'll disappear, it'll draw some more lines, that kind of stuff. So that's how we typically do our line art. And this is just a little preview of how we typically set up our pipeline. So you can kind of see the different pipelines of our production and everything that comes with it. We have tons of different stages, tons of amazing artists who help out on each stage. And you can see here, we start out with very humble beginnings. She's not even animated. She doesn't even have hair at the beginning. But you know, from here, we're able to get all the way to the point where we can finally see her come to life. And then apparently start drowning underwater, but that's fine. She's fine. She likes the water. It's okay. And yeah, so that is our talk. We are, of course, Dillon Gu Studios, and I hope you enjoyed and learned a little bit about how we set up our pipelines and our workflows. Thanks so much. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. We love you.
We do.